Well, welcome everybody to our online program on addiction recovery from the Sunshine Coast Health Center up here in Powell River, BC. And we've been talking about these popular books on addiction, and all of them different. So we've talked about David Sheff's book, Clean, where he argues that addiction is a brain disease over which a person's powerless. We've talked about the neuroscientist Carl Hart, who says, yes, it affects the reward centers in the brain, the addiction does, no question about that, but it does not cognitively impair people. It doesn't screw up their thinking. They're still more than capable of making choices, and his research seems to have backed up that point. And our third best-selling author, Johann Hari's book, Chasing the Scream. And this is an interesting book. In fact, the scholarly research for this material has been around for decades. And in fact, it's kind of interesting, although Harry keeps talking about this as new research. He's quoting the Vietnam War studies, which if you went to the Sunshine Coast, we talk about that. Those are from the early 70s. Bruce Alexander's work on Rat Park, that's from the early 70s. So really, we're looking at research that's 45 years old now, so it's not new, even though Hari tends to think it's probably new to him. Maybe that's really what's going on. But he makes this case that addiction is not so much the effect of the drug on the brain or this idea of choice as it is a result of how society interprets what an addiction is. And he gives this example. He said, before the idea of prohibition, this idea that we should ban drugs by making them illegal, before then, there were lots of people who used drugs that were running into problems, but he says the typical drug user was like middle class. I mean, they had partners, kids, mortgages to pay, went to work every day. It wasn't the huge issue that we see today. And then prohibition started. And everything changed overnight. And people with addiction problems they weren't going to work, they're spending all of their money, operating doing criminal behavior in order to get the money for the substances. And he said that was a direct result of this idea of prohibition, or the war on drugs, as it's known. So the war on drugs actually created this massive problem. And Harry's book, and he relies on a lot of experts, such as Bruce Alexander and people like that, who've done a great deal of research on this, to make this case, and points out that there are several countries around the world that have not followed the war on drugs mentality, such as the most famous one being Portugal, of course, but also Uruguay and Switzerland, and did not find any dramatic increase in problems with drugs. But what they did do, these countries, is they decriminalized it. They tried to get the society to look at the drug addict differently. So the drug addict was no more a criminal. Because what happens, says Hari, is that when you ban a drug, you make it illegal, what you do is you put the drug in the power of organized crime, in the hands of organized crime rather than the government. And organized crime will crank up the price of the drug. There's no quality control anymore. There are basically no rules to the game. And this is really the reason why we see the addiction as we do today. So his argument is, if we really want to solve this addiction problem, then we operate like Portugal or maybe Switzerland, and then we change how society actually looks at the addict. And his big argument for the change is to start seeing addicts as human beings, having compassion for them, and giving up our desire to control them. So it's an interesting argument. So this is a third one now. We've got the addiction as a disease from David Sheff, addiction as a matter of choice from Carl Hart, and now Johann Hari's coming up with this this new idea, which is a bestseller now, that maybe it's society that's really at the root of the problems. Anyway, that's it for this online program, and we'll be back next time to wrap up our bestsellers in addiction.